Hello, good afternoon, Baltimore, and welcome to Baltimore City Voters Live, Episode 1 podcast. And like to introduce and welcome my wonderful co host here, Lauren Brown. You want to say hello, Lauren?
Hello, Baltimore.
Excellent. Well, I thought we'd start the Episode 1 off with a little bit of a explanation of what we're trying to accomplish here with Baltimore City Live, City Voters Live, the podcast. This has been a group that's been around the Baltimore political scene for quite a while, and we thought it was time for the group to experience a little bit more of an interactive experience for the voters and the people of Baltimore to engage. Get off our keyboards a little bit, get a little more intimate and personal. And we wanted to, provide a platform within the group. This group's been a staple as far as the Baltimore City political scene for quite some time, and we're looking forward to offering, any city voter that is passionate about civics and politics in Baltimore, an avenue to be able to engage in a different format, more interactive format. So um, we recognize that the local media here, has a regional audience that they need to cater to. City Voters Live will focus 100% on Baltimore City issues, and we want to dive down to a more granular level than some of the print and news media will want to get into, because it just doesn't pertain to everyone regionally. And we're not the media. We're not going to try to be the media. We're just everyday citizens and voters here in Baltimore City, just like the most of the membership of the group. Um, and we think that the issues within Baltimore City deserve more dedicated coverage. And just want to engage the community of stakeholders that are you know here and within Baltimore. Perspective on this week has been around the issue of bike lanes and the Complete Streets initiative that's currently being implemented around the city. And there's been a lot of passionate debate about that. And I wanted to introduce a guest to the show who has been at the forefront of that, of some of the opposition to Complete Streets. Miss Linda Batts. Linda, are you with us? So, Ms. Batts, we were just discussing the passionate debates that sometimes occur on the Baltimore City Voters Facebook group. You've been one of the vocal opponents of the Complete Streets initiative, and which has sparked a lot of the discourse on the city voters group this week. I just wanted to not so much touch on the issue of Complete Streets. You certainly can, if you'd like to, but more about the level of discourse and what you've seen transpire over the past several days leading up to the city hall rally, and just discuss some of the experiences that you've had interfacing with folks about this particular issue.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for allowing me to do so. But I must preface my comments about the conversation on the Baltimore City Voters page with how we got to this point. And the inception of this started with the Complete Streets legislation and all of the fallacies that were perpetuated attendant to it by Ryan Dorsey and enthusiasts who led in with the argument that we need complete streets because Blacks don't own cars. That kind of fallacy and that kind of misrepresentation distorts the issue and sets the stage for what we have as the division and the contentiousness that we see today. If his argument is that Blacks don't own cars because Blacks can't afford them, then let's talk about economic empowerment. But that's not the issue. The issue is that a group of individuals connected or whatever their interests may be want to realign the city and have been in discussions with city officials from various departments for decades about how the city is going to be demographically reconstituted and what the infrastructure of this city is going to look like to match. Disagree. And so as we migrate into the nuts and bolts of the complete street discussion and the framework on which it is built, it starts off with the argument that pedestrians and bikers are the priority over buses and car drivers. No, everybody in the scheme of transportation and mobility are important, and ensuring that they are safeguarded and ensuring that they have routes to navigate to get to where they are is how this argument in this discussion should have been framed. But it wasn't framed that way. And the way that it has been rolled out, it has been rolled out in a manner where the elite few, particularly interest groups, have been sitting at the table with Baltimore city officials for years, framing out how this would look without the voice of the people being involved. Just look at the constitution of the Mayor's Bicycle Advisory Committee, where your representatives from transportation and planning have leaned not in with what is best for the city or what the interests of the people who live in the city are, but what the interests of a powerful majority of few want. And that's not the way to do business. Complete Streets and this whole discourse about what is right and what is wrong is just about that. What is right and what is wrong. It's not about Republican versus Democrat. It's not about the rich versus the poor. It's simply and fundamentally about what is right. And what is right is not for a small elite group of people to tell intelligent, articulate people who understand what their rights and responsibilities are, how they're going to live, and what changes they're going to make that they have to just adapt to. We have not had a seat at the table, and that exclusionary practice has framed the argument today. So when we look at the Baltimore City's voters page and we respond to some of the insanity and the inanity that we're seeing, we're hearing points like some of the enthusiasts saying, Jed Weeks, for example, who said that he couldn't attend a widely attended community meeting because he didn't have a written agenda ahead of time, and he's afraid of
for their safety. Safety. Yeah, that's where it caught my attention was really that email, and I think that was a real catalyst to some of the the way this got ratcheted up, and the rhetoric that's been thrown around this more recently. Obviously, this has been a much longer existing standing issue. Didn't hit my radar until very, very recently. Obviously, I've seen the impacts of Complete Streets around the city. I wasn't fully aware of where this was all coming from, the new lanes, the bollards, and I was aware of an issue over in Roland Park, because that's kind of it's close to where I live, where there was an implementation and then a lot of complaints and then a re-implementation, and I mean just the amount of money. I'd like to really take a look at how much money have we put into this initiative, and for folks for this much infrastructure to have changed without this the level of community engagement that you're speaking about is concerning. And I think it's something that we need to take a deeper dive into to see how much money has been spent, what it's been spent on, and who drove those initiatives. But more to the point of the level of discourse, I obviously hear that this has definitely been a longer road, for the communities, and just for the listeners, can you just explain who you are, where you live, and who you and what you're representing?
Right. So I am Linda Batts, and I do live in the community of Hanlon. But as I speak and advocate widely regarding complete streets, I am a part of a newly formed group called the Friends of Gwynns Falls Parkway, initiated by community leaders Lawrence Bell, Mary Hughes, myself, and others who represent the expanse of communities who live along Gwynns Falls Parkway and who oppose the determination that the only way to connect Cahill to Druid Hill Park is through a linear route. Those discussions and decisions were made long before the communities that would have been affected were apprised that a linear straight line coming from Cahill to Druid Hill Park is the route that the bikers and the enthusiasts wanted, which means that you're going to cut right through our community. First, the decision was to cut through the median and to disrupt the environmental canopy. Now they want to come through and reconfigure the lanes, eliminating a traffic lane on the widely used corridor of Gwynns Falls Parkway because they are doing this under the guise of resurfacing. All of the pretext and all of the fabrications associated with this are wholly unacceptable in an environment where federal funds and other taxpayers' funds are being used to deal with infrastructure changes. The people have said our infrastructure needs and priorities include fixing alleys, fixing sidewalks, making them ADA accessible and traversable, fixing the lighting and ensuring that we're safe in our communities. That's where we see our priorities are. And yes, we are concerned about bikers and pedestrians. And that is why we carved out alternate routes that the bikers and the pedestrians and whomever from Cahill could use to get to their ultimate destinations. But it is not what they want. It's not what they said. It's not what they pinpointed when they sat down at this table of brotherhood decades ago without us having a seat there to make these decisions.
Yeah,
and so
that's the key.
To go back to
the drawing board. Yeah.
To Jed Weeks, because he has said that he didn't want to attend this meeting because he didn't get an agenda. Well, he didn't get a written agenda, but he got an oral agenda very clearly from Mary Hughes, who indicated to him who would be there, who had been invited, and what the topics were for conversation. Then he went into this fear mode. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid? No one has threatened you. We speak passionately about.
Well, that becomes the narrative. Obviously, when you put that email out there, there's obviously the insinuation that someone needed to be in fear, of their safety, and that's a heavy charge.
It is a heavy charge, and it perpetuates the many stereotypes
of course,
and fallacies that people of color have had to deal with for decades. When whites speak with authority and tone and bass in their conviction,
it's passion.
Passionately. But when blacks speak with authority and tone in their conviction, they're being divisive, they're being argumentative. Take some cultural sensitivity training, Bike More and Greenway Trails Network and Rails to Trails, and let's come back. We have said we need to dial this whole discourse back 10 or 15 years.
I completely agree. Just in the short time that I've been familiar with the situation, obviously, I think Jed Weeks has lost complete control of this situation as far as the bike lobby is concerned. I don't think he can do anything helpful for those guys at this point, and they need to move on from Jed Weeks. I mean that. I think someone said it best, where the email itself is unforgivable. Now, I think there were some real opportunities as the rhetoric started to ratchet up this week. There was some real opportunity for some other folks to step up, which we can talk about, another time. When you're looking at the folks who are, in office right now, the Ryan Dorseys, the folks like that, and other leaders within our agencies, really had an opportunity to kind of step in and interject in some of the discourse that's been going on, because it just it got to a fairly nasty place, and I'm really disappointed that didn't happen. So for those that are seeking office and those who are in office, a situation that you're close to that starts to take on the tone and the rhetoric that it did, it would have been great for them to show some leadership and get in there to, and tone it down. So, but Linda, I certainly appreciate your time and your perspective, and certainly we're going to offer this same opportunity for the folks who are advocates of bike lanes and complete streets, to say their piece. They're more than welcome to come on to the show. The show's for everyone. And it would be great to have everyone on together and at least get to a place where we're having a conversation and not a battle. But
May I say one additional thing, sir, please?
Sure.
And that is, I said in that email chain, which I stopped responding to at some point, I said everybody is making excuses and pointing the finger, but not one person has said, as I suggested, let's get together and hammer this through reasonable discourse and negotiation to talk about what our interests are respectively and how we can achieve an infrastructure that doesn't trammel the rights of one group to advance the interests of another. Because that's the bottom line. Let's talk it out. No one has responded to that.
Well, we'll see if we can get some responses now. I think there's quite a bit more attention on this situation at this point. It's been covered quite a bit this week in the media, and if you didn't have their attention before, I think you've got it now. So thank you very much, Linda. I appreciate your advocacy.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for your leadership in bringing the interests of the people to the foreground. Thank you.
Absolutely. Look forward to talking to you soon. Well, that was an earful. What do you think, Lauren? I don't know if you've been following this, how closely you've been following that story, but the banner
very closely. So, but that's pretty compelling. Without knowing much about the issue, I tend to be very pro bike lane. I'm not a big car enthusiast. Sorry. And but yeah, she makes some very, very good points.
Yeah.
You can't just
and car enthusiasts or not. I think the issue when it gets down to what she's talking about is how it's implemented and the impacts on the communities where they're implemented and their involvement in that process of the implementation. And I think that she's made it clear, at least from my perspective, she's made it clear, and everyone in Gwynns Falls has made it clear that they're not anti-bike lane. Now, I think when you look at the sign that says no bike lane, that triggers obviously triggers a certain response, but what that means, what that sign actually means, and it's good. I think it's good to give that sign some context. That sign means no bike lane through Gwynns Falls Parkway, right? So, what they're talking about is how it's going to be, how the bike lanes are implemented. I think everyone agrees that we want bikers to be safe. They need to have space to do their sport, and that the implementation thereof is, I think, is important. But beyond that, how they frame their arguments, and I think it's really disingenuous with some of the arguments that they're framing as to why they're doing what they're doing. Now, that may be a vision that they have, but it certainly isn't the reason that they're doing what they're doing. They want bike lanes because they like to bike, and that's okay. It's okay to bike. But moving on from the bike lanes, we moving on to some of the other items going on in the city is the nonprofit sector and some of the things that are happening there. With the amount of money that our city government is, and I think a lot of these issues are related to our city government, how it's structured, the level of power that the mayor has, and that there's not as much balance as there may need to be as far as decision making is concerned, which really lends itself to special interests being able to get a lot of things that they want. But the nonprofit world here is something that I've been curious about over the past couple of years and been monitoring. Is this something that you've been paying any attention to as well
Yes, recently I have
recently? Yeah.
a bit.
Yeah, so it's just one of those areas where there's a lot of money's going into it. If you follow the Safe Streets issue, and I think it's been covered that a lot of money goes into these organizations, but once that money leaves the custody of Baltimore City government, it becomes it becomes out of our purview as citizens. We don't get an opportunity to have the transparency. When we ask, what the money is being used for or spent on, we're being told that they're non-government agencies, and they're not even subject to public information. So beyond that of a regular nonprofit where you get to see their 990s, but even in that scenario, we're seeing nonprofits that are coming into existence that are brand new, that don't have a history, that are being awarded money, and you don't really get a solid trail. I think one of the most recent examples of nonprofit impropriety was with this Clean Streets initiative, where the mayor took $15 million and decided he was going to give it to the Baltimore Civic Fund, which is a quasi-government agency, pretty much run by the mayor. Their board is somewhat controlled by the mayor, and $15 million to do jobs and tasks that our DPW solid waste division, we already pay them to do that. I mean, we have a $40-some million solid waste budget with DPW. They're supposed to clean up the alleys. They're supposed to clean the streets, sidewalks and things of that nature. So why are we taking an additional $15 million when we're not even picking up the recycling on our mandated schedule, and shoving it into a quasi-government agency who is then giving that money to nonprofits, one in particular, the Lazarus Rite, who, as you've done some homework on, and what are your thoughts there?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting example, because the man who runs that organization, the Lazarus Rite, was in bankruptcy, I think, at the time when the money was awarded. He also has a interesting criminal background. And apparently the Baltimore City either didn't look into his financial status before awarding his organization the money, or they just didn't care. Either way, it's just kind of hard to believe.
It is. It's so hard to believe.
Like someone who's financially irresponsible, that organization got what, 1.3 million?
It said 1.3 in the award letter, but it actually turns out that they were awarded $1.6 million.
So that was, and for what I was looking at, that was the biggest for that Clean Streets initiative. Was that the biggest award?
They were the biggest award. Yeah. I mean, out of names such as Bon Secours, okay, names.
Of course, someone in bankruptcy is more trustworthy than a well-known organization.
So you tell me how that happens, where Baltimore Civic Works, is a reputable agency, $19 million budget. You look at their 990, solid organization, has I can't remember how many employees, but it's a real organization. You got Bon Secours, obviously it's a national organization. Some other nonprofits in there that on the Clean Corp initiative that has gotten that got money, but $1.6 million to a nonprofit that literally had one full-time employee that it states on its 990, that when they do file 990s, has one full-time employee, two part-timers, 20 hours a week. Never ever managed over I think in 1 year over $80,000, and this is again going off the records that they actually provided because several years aren't even provided. They weren't even up to date with the filings. So you tell me how what was the vetting process of Clean Streets when an organization such as the Lazarus Wright gets awarded $1.6 million, and it was a red flag. We brought it up, and it ended exactly as you would expect something like that to end. And the gentleman ended up getting the contract terminated within 4 months. The city is now we're still trying to get answers from the city on what what the current situation is on that. But
Yeah, 'cause he owes the city money now.
he does. I mean, last that we got a real record on was May 30th. The Civic Fund sent out a letter for you guys that are viewing on screen. You can see the letter. The letter went out that said that they gave this gentleman of the 1.6, they actually dispersed about $414,000 to this individual. He submitted expenses, which I guess they approved of about 160,000 or so, 167,000 or so. And, in May, he goes and tells all the workers that there's no more funding and they're laid off. And I start to get, text messages and DMs from some of his workers. And, turns out he's telling them, that, that we shut them down somehow. But either way, the Civic Fund decided to cancel the contract and said that at the time, $267,000, had been missing from the coffers. Well, when you don't vet these companies, and it's been covered, and they went looking for them. They started
The
to.
vetting would have been simple. Like you found out
Yeah.
all of this very, very easily.
It-
It's not like
Not a
someone-
heavy haul, right?
Yeah.
Not a heavy haul.
information available to anyone with an internet connection.
Yeah, and it's $267,000 is missing, and the media goes to look for him. He's hiding in his house. He won't answer the door. The neighbor's on the phone with him outside. They run over and talk to the neighbor, and this guy's just on social media yesterday, acting like he doesn't owe the money. So as taxpayers, we want to know, where's our money going? It's going into these nonprofits. What's coming out of it?
Mhm.
And it's it's really disturbing. And I know there's a bill that's in the council now, and the I think it's the transparency in grant making, I think will do something towards cleaning this up. And at the very least, it's calling for some, and we'll cover this in a lot more detail another time, but it's going to be asking for nonprofits to submit certain documentation. There's going to be certain requirements. It'll add some level of vetting, because right now, literally the nonprofit spaces, whoever the mayor really believes should get money, and then they're funded. So it's mind-boggling that we can give $1.6 million. I'm an entrepreneur. I've had to raise money before. I can tell you how hard it is to raise $1 million for a startup project, and in this environment, the mayor just has, and it's been exacerbated tremendously by this COVID relief money, because with that $641 million that we received from the federal government, it was completely at the mayor's discretion. Like this was basically a Powerball ticket, given to the mayor, and he had a real opportunity here with that 641 million to really do something big, like something that we would
Mhm.
all recognize, like a legacy situation. And instead, he he's divvying it out all over town to these some of these sham nonprofits, this being one of them. Um, and millions of dollars are no longer, available to the citizens of Baltimore and the folks that don't that really need it.
Yeah, with that kind of money, I mean, you would think you could do something great and focus on uh, organizations that are reputable, that have a history, that have been vetted, not brand new organizations or organizations with 2 employees.
Mhm.
Sorry.
Yeah, and then what they do is some occasions they'll take the money and give it to what they call a fiscal sponsor, and the fiscal sponsor is a reputable agency, and then they divvy it out to um to whoever there's just pointed to is supposed to be getting this money. In this situation, it was the Department of Planning, in particular Chris Ryer, director of the Department of Planning, who made the decision. It was his decision, right? And we'll have to talk a little bit about why that decision was made at another time, but it was his decision, to give this money, uh, to this gentleman, the one point award this money at least to this gentleman, um, you know, for for cleaning up sidewalks. $1.6 million to clean up sidewalks, and it was in
Why
like
couldn't they just give more money to like the city agency?
DPW.
That,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's supposed to be
The agency that we have that is actually looking for employees. They're understaffed.
they're underpaid,
Um,
aren't they?
they're understaffed. They're underpaid. Thanks for bringing that up. These guys are tremendously underpaid. I think the councilman was also I think it was Cohen and Schleifer had come together to put something forward that would increase their pay and for the folks that were on the trucks.
Mhm.
I'm not sure how that went, whether it went through or not, but um, you look at the folks that are in the office that are making $100,000. I mean, this administration has more $200,000 employees than any I don't than any administration in recent history, but yet we can't pay our guys a reasonable amount of money to stand on the back of a truck.
Sounds like we could have if we hadn't given so much money to
Right.
organizations with
Yeah.
no reputation. But yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, and this it does have an impact because I don't want to say that the nonprofit, this is the entirety of the nonprofit world. There are great nonprofits out there doing tremendous work, and guess what? They don't have the funding that they need to actually. I mean, you look at some of these. Look at the situation with and we'll have to cover this deeper another time, but the group that the mayor's girlfriend went to work with, who was I think their 990 showed that they were bringing in over $600,000 and spending 10%, about 60 on actual programming. So, these are all things that really impact the nonprofit ecosystem, and at this time, I'd like to welcome Aja Doswell, who is let her introduce herself, but runs a group called Keys and Powers, and Aja, I just wanted to kind of bring you on to the stream and talk a little bit about the nonprofit ecosystem in Baltimore City, and how some of these situations where the bad actors impact the efforts of the good actors and the folks that are really doing the work, and the money is the money that's given to them is actually seen on the street, and but yet you know, you're not getting $1.6 million thrown your way just willy-nilly. So you're out there grinding, and this is an organization that deserves $1.6 million. So talk to us about Keys and Powers and how some of this stuff impacts the good folks in the industry.
So good afternoon. My name is Asia Doswell, and I'm the CFO for Keys and Powers. And the thing about the nonprofit ecosystem is that it's one that everyone wants to be a part of, yet no one has been taught how to be a part of. And, Baltimore is a very unique place. It is a do or die. It is a be taught or be eaten. And we are at a point where we have taught ourselves how to manage or fiscally be responsible for things that are happening in our community that we haven't been groomed for. And the ecosystem relies on relationships, and relationships sometimes look like politics. They sometimes look like responses for procedures. They look like all of these different things that involve an exchange of some type of currency or entity. And it happens with all of these social relationships that have been groomed since childhood, being in the same communities or going to the same colleges and universities. Then you end up at the same organizations or the same states or city departments. And it kind of leads that way, but there has to be an integrity component to it. And we all want for our person at the table to eat with us, but it's being clear about what they're eating and how much they're being served. So is the pie being divided evenly for someone who can afford to eat the portion that's being given? And I think that's what you've been speaking to, is that portions have been given for people who have not been able to eat what's been put on their table. And therefore
Right.
it looks like mismanagement.
It looks like mismanagement, but and some of it, a lot of times is honest. I mean, running a business is It's tough. I've been doing it for 20 since I left New York, so about 21 years now. I've been running my own business, and it's a really tough thing to do. And the budget, like everything, because you have to be all things, right? You have to become an expert at marketing. You have to become an expert at sales. You have to become almost a lawyer. You have to become you have to be able to do the jobs that everything that your company does. And I think a big problem with this is I kid, I punch at the mayor a little bit, but the guy's been working in government his entire life, and not that anyone's here to punch on the mayor, but when you haven't run a business before, you haven't run so much as a Kool-Aid stand, it's very hard to understand the nuances of what it means to give someone $1.6 million, because I can tell you, if my child comes to me and asks for $100, I'm going to ask what is going to be the return on that $100. Like, what am I getting for that, right? And it may be just worth it to get you out of my face for right now. Like, that may be my return. But I get them to think about cost of funds, and just from a business perspective. And what we see is it's treated a lot of times like monopoly money, like it's fake, like it doesn't, like it's just it's not real to them. And this is real money, and it has real impact. And as you mentioned, you should only feed someone what they can actually digest. When you give someone money, cash, like to that level, I mean, it's something you got to work up to, right? You start off with giving them what they can handle, letting them do a good turn on that, and then building it up. And what I'd really love to see is I'm not sure how the councilman's bill, the grant making bill that's in the council now. I don't know if it's going to come to fruition or not. But if it does, I wonder what type of impact have you been? Are you familiar with that bill? Have you looked at it at all? Whether or not it would be something that would add some guardrails at least to the process.
So I did have a chance to look it over. And this the request is not something that's above what's been required for receiving funds. It's really
Right.
asking to review the fiscal responsibilities of those who are receiving the dollars and
Got it.
responsible for the dollars. It would be the same as any type of fiscal audit that we were to do for any larger entity, T. Rowe Price, Annie Casey, ABAG Foundation, whoever it is. And so the thing about it is the difference is that it now gets into people's personal lives that have not been a part of that, because now there's a benefit, or they're trying to identify if there's misappropriation of funds.
Got it.
I think there's an education component to this, because as you just said, the people who are making these decisions have not done this work before.
Exactly.
So it's very hard for someone to say, you wanted to have me give you all of this stuff annually. I'm a year and a half behind on getting taxes done just because my CPA is booked. And you want me to provide this. Now, does this hinder if I'm able to get funds within the next fiscal period? Like, there's some things to this that have holes, and it would be more advantageous to figure out, well, is this a 5-year process, or like a certification? Or is this going to be a requirement every 3 to 5 years, or when your board is changed or things are changed? There's more programmatic ways to institute that for us to maybe make it easier if it is implemented. But this is a lot to require annually when it's based on a third party completing it, who already does other things third party.
Gotcha. And that is specific. I heard you 100%. And that's the type of feedback that I think it's important for legislators to hear and for them to to consider. So hopefully you'll follow that bill and provide the necessary industry insight, so that it's something that can be implemented, that doesn't disrupt, but does what it's intended to do, as far as creating, more equitable distribution of the city's, treasury, which is really what it's designed to do.
Most definitely.
And and whatever else you'd like for the listeners to know about yourself or Keys, feel free. The stage is yours, and we're certainly glad you're able to join us today.
Thank you. Thank you. I think the biggest thing is just understanding we are at a point of understanding the impact of COVID and isolation. And right now, everyone is supercharged and high in intense energy with emotion, which means we're all ticking time bombs. We also all need a place of relief. Relief for you just maybe saying hello to somebody, offering a kind word, or holding open a door. And our message is always about just leaving a room better than the way that you found it. And that's important right now, because the money that we're requesting for a city that's having as much trauma as we are. The last set of youth who've been impacted in gun violence, theft, all these other entities have been under the age of 16. Our city needs us, our children need us, and more importantly, we need these dollars in the right hands of the right orgs to be able to provide the right services, because community is needed now more than ever. So as Keys Empowers, we're working on a community program at Coppin State University called Keys Community Healing Village. It is a 30,000 square foot multi-generational recreation center / mental health / urgent care that will be open 24 hours per day. Once it is put up, hopefully by 2025, fingers crossed. We're actually supposed to be in ground by September 24th. But our community needs a place to come and be fed 7 nights per week. We need a place for our youth to be able to come and act out on the energy, because we don't have recreation centers. We need a place for senior citizens and some more seasoned community members to feel safe and want to go on walks and do things with their grandchildren and great grandchildren. And it's
invaluable. Invaluable. And I mean, for everyone that would listen, I grew up in DC, and back, don't want to date myself, but back when I was a young kid, the schools were open 7:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. all year long, right? So I remember that's where I ate breakfast, it's where I ate lunch, it's where I played basketball, it's where I played football. It was a school up the street from me. And you got to give them that place to go, that safe space to go. If not, they're going to find it, and it might not be so safe. So it's great to hear that you're doing that, and kudos to you for the work that you do. And I had the wonderful opportunity of meeting some of your babies a couple of days ago, and just a fantastic experience. And I, looking forward to the next opportunity to do so.
Thank you. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much for being on the show. We look forward to having you back.
Have a good one.
Excellent. Wow. And that is the good side of the nonprofit world, right? So, and there's plenty of those. There's plenty of those. So moving on, the other news this week, I think there was the hearing. So BGE, and their quest to see through this rate hike, which obviously involves the conduit situation, involves the regulator situation. I think all of that is part of their desire to move as much operating expenses over to capital expenses, which would justify the rate hike that they're asking the PSC to approve in December. Submitted on February, I believe it was 17th of 2023, they submitted a rate hike that was just 2 days after our illustrious mayor decided to sign an agreement to help them transfer $30 million a year or so from being operating expense to capital expense by canceling their lease agreement and making it some agreement to perform capital projects. Never in my life have I seen that I can remember that I can see a big city mayor actually move an agreement around in support of a big utility so that they can raise rates on its constituents and everyone else around the state. But that's what's happening, or that's what's happening. At least that's what I believe happened. What are your thoughts on this? I know you've been a little bit closer to this situation. We've had the young ladies who, what are they called? Fells Point 3. What are they called? That went to.
I didn't know they had a nickname.
I think they have a nickname. I thought they were called something. But these ladies who went to battle with BGE in the streets and said, you're not going to be installing these regulators, and they ended up going to jail. External regulators, and I think we are at least a place that makes good sense, right? I think if a utility wants to do a project on your house, they should have to get permission from you to do a project on your house.
Yeah.
I just don't understand. I mean, I don't know why that wouldn't have been just the norm. I don't know why we needed a council bill to make that happen. But anyway, you were at the hearing, the PSC hearing. What did you learn?
The PSC hearing, I think, is later. It was the CHAP hearing yesterday.
Oh, the CHAP hearing.
So
okay. Oh,
the
yeah.
Decision there only applies to CHAP houses or CHAP neighborhoods. But we're hoping that sets a precedent. But they ruled that BGE now cannot, I hope I'm getting this right, install the external regulators without permission of the homeowner if it's a single family home or below 6 units in a multifamily dwelling. Above 6 units, then they don't need permission. There's a law that went into effect.
Okay.
Getting the name of the law. I think it only went into effect last year. That deals with multifamily housing.
Not the multifamily.
So, but yeah, for private homeowners and anyone in a small building, they will now need permission, and they cannot cut off gas service.
The threat, yeah, bullying people into it. Right. And
BGE was actually just kind of lying to people about that, forgetting the name of the law.
Imagine that.
Yeah, not kind of implying that it applies to all homes when they were convincing some people, whereas it only applies to buildings with more than 6 units.
Got it. And that was the response, I believe, to something that happened in Silver Spring where there was an explosion.
I had notes in front of me. Yes, there's an explosion.
Yeah, I remember that. It's actually close to my hometown. That was a tragic situation, and
which apparently had nothing to do with indoor versus external regulators.
I think that must be something you just learned at that hearing. It is because right, and
I learned a lot.
a big surprise. The big utility is lying about a tragic situation.
I mean,
All right.
their presentation yesterday, I feel like it was mostly lying about tragic situations because they mentioned other
Yeah.
situations and they didn't
Yeah.
give the full story.
Right. And that's to be expected. It's a utility. They have shareholders. I mean, they need their they need their earnings per share to go up. We get that. That makes good sense for them. What doesn't make a sense, and what I don't understand, is why is our city government participating in that? And it's good to see, Eric Costello and Council President Mosby and Sharon Green Millington on the stage and Robert Stokes presenting the bill, and if they're saying if the PAC doesn't act, they will, and I think they mean it. And they've got the legislation, they're introducing it. I hope they get the votes. And that's just great leadership, and also credit to Council President Mosby for recognizing that even the chat process had its own inequities, right? So even the folks who were given a stay of execution by BGE because they were in the chat part of chat, and what he's saying is that the actual distribution of chat designation hasn't historically been fair, and that's a whole facet, and that I hadn't even, that wasn't even part of my calculus before he mentioned it. But I think that is absolutely, when you're talking about the situation in Upton and those places, he's basically saying, like, some people were protected by a process that wasn't equitable to begin with. So I think there's a lot to go down there, and there's a lot of little nuances to this situation that hopefully will be recognized, and hopefully Council President Mosby gets his credit for those. So we'll see what happens with that situation. But it's great to see this level of civic engagement on that issue. I know you had mentioned that you didn't think the regulators were that ugly.
When I
but
first learned about the issue, issue, I did not care much.
You
I
didn't care
didn't
about
think it mattered.
Right.
So I mean, and I still personally don't care about the aesthetics that much.
If it were your house, you'd say, "Go ahead, put the regulator there."
Yeah,
right?
But it's not just about the aesthetics.
Right. It's about personal choice.
Yeah.
Right?
And BG is also
property owners. Right?
BG is also claiming that it's so much safer to have them outside versus inside, but they still haven't presented any data that actually supports that. Like they just they talk about it, and you're supposed to, when an engineer is speaking on behalf of BGE, like you tend to believe them, but then you realize, wait, they just keep saying the same lines over and over with nothing to back it up, and I don't know, just leads a really bad taste in my mouth.
It does, and
especially since and I found this out yesterday, when the regulator is on the outside of a house, BGE isn't as responsible for it. They're not responsible for the maintenance, like making sure that it's not, nothing's corroding, that there isn't a buildup of snow or whatever. And it was suggested that they are not responsible, like they can't be sued for a malfunction with an external regulator, or it's much harder to sue them, something where they have less liability. So it's actually, it's a good deal for BGE to have external regulators versus internal.
Right. What it sounds like is cuts down on some of the maintenance that they might have to do, which again decreases their operating expenses, which is, like I said, it's fair for a for-profit business to want to do that.
Yeah.
What's not fair is for a local government to participate in it. And obviously, we got to keep BGE on their toes, and the Public Service Commission is supposed to do that. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Public Service Commission, because the city is going to, the mayor's going to take his heat for his involvement in this rate hike scheme, and that's going to play out over over the next, several months. The rate hike determination is going to take place in December. And that's going to bleed right into election season. What's interesting is whether or not the PSC is the Public Service Commission is a state agency.
Okay.
Right. So, so they're subject to the governor.
Yeah.
Right. So will the governor feel enough pressure on this and heat on this? Will the governor, it's his PSC, it's his Public Service Commission. Are they going to approve BGE's rate hike? And, we'll have to keep
Be
following, I
interesting.
guess.
Oh yeah.
Well, all right. There you have it. A show that we thought would be 25 minutes is now at 58. And I am ready to sign off and call it a wrap for our episode 1 of the City Voters Live podcast. I thank you for joining. I hope we will continue to get your viewership, and we just want to make sure anyone and everyone is welcome to participate. We are reachable at bcv@cityvoterslive.com. If you have an issue that you want discussed on the show, feel free to drop us a line via email, bcv@cityvoterslive.com. We look forward to bringing you back for episode 2. And be safe, Baltimore.